Chosen one. This Christmas gift didn't come wrapped in paper or tied with a ribbon. It arrived as a moment, a shift, a quiet but undeniable realization that something has finally reached you. You didn't click on this by accident. I know people say that all the time, but this feels different. This feels like timing lining up in a way you couldn't have forced even if you tried. So before anything else, I want you to slow down for a second, not dramatically, just enough to feel where you are right now. Because this message only lands if you're present with it. Stay until the end. Not because I need you to, but because something in you already knows there's more here than the first few minutes can hold. And if you feel it, even slightly, write your warmest wish in the comments and say, Amen. Not for me, but as a way of releasing it, letting the universe hear you clearly, without overthinking it, without editing yourself. Now listen, this gift isn't loud. It's not fireworks or instant miracles or a sudden flip of reality. It's quieter than that. And that's why most people miss it. It arrives as clarity, as a strange calm in the middle of noise, as the feeling that something old has loosened its grip on you, even if you can't fully explain how. Christmas has a way of doing that, not because of tradition, but because it creates a pause. And in that pause, things surface, truths, realizations, a sense of what you've been carrying for too long. You've been carrying a lot, more than you admit out loud. You're good at functioning, at showing up, at keeping things moving. But underneath that, there's been this quiet pressure, like you're always one step away from something changing, yet it never quite does. That's exhausting. And it messes with your trust, not just in life, but in yourself. This gift is about that, about restoring trust, slowly, honestly, without pretending everything is perfect. Here's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes the gift isn't what you receive. It's what finally stops being taken from you. Your energy, your focus, your emotional fuel, the constant overthinking, the replaying of old conversations, the weight of expectations that were never really yours to begin with. This moment marks a shift where you stop bleeding in places you didn't even realize were still open. You may notice it subtly at first. You don't react the same way. Certain things don't trigger you like they used to. You sleep a little deeper. You breathe a little easier. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never really listening anyway. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. And alignment doesn't announce itself. It just happens. Quietly, firmly, irreversibly. This Christmas carries a different energy for you because you're different now. Not louder, not harder, just clearer. You've learned what doesn't work. You've felt disappointment deeply enough that you no longer romanticize false hope. And because of that, you're finally in a position to receive something real, something sustainable, something that doesn't require you to shrink or perform or sacrifice your peace to keep it. There's also this strange feeling you might be having, like you're standing at the edge of something new, but you're not rushing toward it. That's maturity. That's wisdom, earned the hard way. You're not chasing anymore. You're allowing, and that changes everything. When you stop chasing, life stops running from you. Pay attention in the coming days, not to signs in the sky or dramatic confirmations, but to your inner responses. What feels lighter? What feels forced? Who drains you? Who doesn't? Where you feel resistance? Where you feel flow? This gift sharpens your discernment. It teaches you to trust your internal signals again, after a long time of second-guessing yourself. And no, everything won't magically fix itself overnight. That's not how real change works. But something has been set in motion, a chain reaction you don't need to control. Your only job right now is not to sabotage it by doubting what you already feel deep down. Let this moment be enough. Let this awareness settle. Let yourself receive without immediately asking, what's next? For once, you don't need to do anything. Just stay awake to what's already unfolding. This gift didn't arrive to impress you. It arrived to steady you, And that's far more powerful than most people realize. There's something else happening beneath the surface now, and it might feel unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. Because for a long time, chaos was normal for you. Uncertainty was familiar. Even pain had a rhythm you learned how to move with. When that starts to fade, when the noise lowers, the silence can feel strange. Not peaceful at first, just empty. And that's where many people panic and run back to what they know. Don't do that. This part of the journey isn't about filling the silence. It's about learning to stand inside it without needing to escape. Because silence is where you hear yourself again. Not the version shaped by survival or expectations or old wounds, but the quieter voice underneath all of that. The one that's been waiting patiently while you handled everything else. You might notice old habits trying to pull you back. Old thought loops. Old fears dressed up as logic. That's normal. It doesn't mean you're going backward. It means those patterns are losing power, and they're reacting. Think of it like a muscle that's been clenched for years finally starting to release. There's tension in that release. Sometimes even pain. But it's a sign of healing, not failure. What's changing now is your relationship with control. You've tried controlling outcomes, controlling emotions, controlling how people see you, and none of that ever brought the peace you were hoping for. This gift is teaching you a different kind of strength. The kind that comes from knowing when to step back, from trusting timing instead of forcing movement, from letting things reveal themselves instead of demanding answers immediately. You're also becoming more honest with yourself. And that's not always pretty. You're seeing where you stayed too long, where you ignored red flags because you wanted something to work, where you gave more than you had, thinking it would eventually balance out. This honesty isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to free you. You can't change what you refuse to see, but once you see it clearly, it loses its grip. There's a subtle shift in how you feel about people too. Some connections feel distant now, even if nothing happened. Others feel unexpectedly warm. That's alignment adjusting your environment. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming precise. Your energy is learning where it belongs and where it doesn't. And that's going to save you years of emotional exhaustion if you let it. You may feel less interested in proving yourself, less drawn to validation, less willing to explain your choices to people who don't really care to understand. That's not arrogance. That's self-respect settling in, quietly, firmly, without needing an announcement. There's also grief mixed into this stage. Grief for versions of yourself that tried so hard, for timelines you imagined, for outcomes you believed in with your whole heart. Let that grief exist. Don't rush it away. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you cared deeply. And caring deeply is not a weakness, no matter how many times life tried to convince you otherwise. What matters now is that you don't rush to replace what's leaving. Give yourself space. Space to recalibrate. Space to feel what stability actually feels like in your body. Space to notice that you don't have to struggle as much as you once did to be okay. This part isn't loud. It doesn't look impressive from the outside. But internally, it's a massive restructuring. Foundations are shifting. Priorities are rearranging themselves. And once that's done, what comes next will feel more natural than anything you've chased before. You're not late. You're not behind. You're right on time, just in a way that doesn't fit old expectations. Let that be enough for now. At some point, you start to realize that the heaviness you used to wake up with isn't there every morning anymore. It doesn't disappear all at once. It fades, quietly. One day you notice you're breathing a little deeper. Another day you catch yourself not replaying the same thought on a loop. And then there's a moment, small, almost forgettable, where you react differently than you used to. That's when it hits you. Something really did change. This stage is about trust, but not the blind kind. Not the kind where you ignore reality and hope for the best. It's a grounded trust. a steady one. Trust in your ability to handle what comes, not in life always being gentle. You've been through enough to know that certainty is an illusion. What you have now is resilience with awareness, and that's powerful. You may notice that your intuition feels sharper, not dramatic, just clear. You sense when something is off. You sense when something is right, and instead of arguing with yourself about it, you listen. That alone changes the course of things more than any big decision ever could. When you stop betraying your own inner signals, life stops needing to scream to get your attention. There's also a shift in how you experience time. You're less rushed, less frantic. You still have goals, still want growth, still care deeply, but there's less desperation attached to it. You're no longer trying to outrun some invisible clock. You're moving at a pace that actually belongs to you. And strangely enough, that's when things begin to move faster. You might feel a pull toward simplicity. Cleaner spaces, fewer conversations, more intentional choices. This isn't you shrinking your world, it's you refining it. Energy isn't infinite. You're learning to invest it where it compounds instead of leaks, and that's wisdom earned through experience, not theory. There's a moment in this phase where you realize you don't need closure for everything. Some questions won't be answered. Some stories won't finish the way you expected. And yet, you're okay. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped needing everything to make sense in order to move forward. That's freedom. You may also notice a quiet confidence returning. Not the performative kind, not the loud attention-seeking version. This confidence doesn't announce itself. It shows up as calm decisions, as firm boundaries, as the ability to say no without guilt and yes without fear. It's subtle, but it's real. What's important here is that you don't rush this clarity. Don't try to use it too quickly. Let it settle into your nervous system. Let your body learn that peace doesn't mean danger. That calm doesn't mean something bad is about to happen. That's a relearning process, and it takes patience. You're not becoming someone else. You're becoming more yourself. The version that isn't constantly bracing for impact. The version that trusts their own footing. The version that knows when to move and when to wait. And from this place, decisions start to feel less heavy. Paths reveal themselves without force. You don't need to push doors anymore. You'll feel which ones are already open. This is the turning point where effort begins to align with ease. Not because life suddenly becomes simple, but because you finally are. There's a different kind of awareness that comes online now. It's not excitement. It's not fear. It's recognition. You recognize patterns as they form, not after they've already played out. You recognize when something is asking too much of you. You recognize when you're about to abandon yourself just to keep the peace. And for the first time, you pause before doing it. This is where self-respect stops being an idea and starts becoming behavior. Quiet behavior. Unapologetic behavior. You don't explain as much. You don't defend your instincts. You don't need permission to choose what keeps you steady. And that doesn't make you distant. It makes you anchored. You may notice that some people don't quite know how to meet you here. They were used to the version of you that overextended, overgave, overthought. The one who made things easier for everyone else at your own expense. When that version steps back, it can feel unsettling. For them, not for you. And you don't need to fix that discomfort. It's not yours to carry. There's also a strange lightness in letting go of being misunderstood. You stop trying to correct every narrative. You stop chasing clarity from people who benefit from confusion. You realize that being at peace is worth more than being right. And once you accept that, something inside you relaxes deeply. This phase teaches you discernment without bitterness. You're not shutting down. You're tuning in. You're learning the difference between intuition and impulse, between patience and avoidance, between rest and stagnation. That kind of clarity only comes after you've been tired enough to take yourself seriously. You might feel moments of solitude more strongly now. Not loneliness, solitude. The kind that feels intentional, restorative, honest. You don't reach for noise the way you used to. Silence doesn't scare you anymore. It feels like space. And space is where your real thoughts finally have room to breathe. There's also a recalibration happening around ambition. You still want more. Growth, stability, purpose. But you no longer want it at the cost of your nervous system. You're done confusing burnout with progress. You're done glorifying struggle just to feel deserving. You're learning that ease can coexist with effort, and that peace doesn't mean you've stopped moving forward. You may feel a quiet pride when you notice how far you've come, not in a loud way, just a small internal nod, a recognition that you survived things that once felt impossible, that you didn't harden, that you didn't lose your depth, that you learned instead of closing off. That matters more than any external win. What's forming now is stability from the inside out, not dependent on outcomes, not tied to approval, not shaken by every shift in the environment. This kind of stability changes how life responds to you. People sense it. Opportunities align with it. Conflict doesn't stick the way it used to. You're not waiting anymore. You're preparing without rushing. You're grounded without being stuck. And this is the version of you that can receive what's next without breaking under it. Nothing about this is accidental. You're exactly where you need to be, strong enough to hold what's coming, and calm enough not to force it. Something begins to open up here, and it doesn't announce itself. It feels more like permission than arrival. Permission to want again. Permission to imagine without immediately bracing for disappointment. For a long time, hope felt risky to you. Like something that had to be managed carefully, kept small, kept quiet. Now it starts to stretch its legs a little. Not recklessly, just enough to remind you that desire doesn't have to equal suffering. This stage reconnects you with your forward vision, but in a cleaner way. You're not fantasizing to escape the present. You're sensing what fits. You can feel the difference between something that excites you and something that actually aligns with who you are now. That distinction changes everything. It saves you from chasing shiny distractions that would have drained you before. You might notice new ideas surfacing, not loud ones, subtle nudges, thoughts that return gently, again and again. Pay attention to those. They're not random. They're forming from a place of clarity instead of urgency, from stability instead of lack. And when ideas come from that place, they tend to grow naturally rather than burning out. There's also a renewed sense of self-trust taking root. You don't need external reassurance the way you once did. You don't need to explain your process. You know what you're doing, even if you can't fully articulate it yet. That quiet knowing is stronger than confidence that depends on feedback. You may feel drawn to invest in yourself in ways you previously postponed. Time, learning, health, creative expression. Not because you're trying to fix something broken, but because you finally feel worth the effort. That shift alone alters your trajectory. When you stop treating yourself as an afterthought, life responds differently. This phase also clarifies your standards, what you tolerate, what you engage with, what you walk away from without drama. You're no longer negotiating with your own boundaries. You've seen what happens when you do, and you're choosing differently now. Not from anger, but from understanding. There's a calm excitement underneath all of this. Not the anxious kind that needs immediate results. The grounded kind that trusts momentum. You don't need everything to happen at once. You're willing to build, to let things compound, to stay present while the future takes shape. You may catch yourself smiling at small things, moments you would have overlooked before. That's not randomness. That's nervous system safety returning. When you're no longer in survival mode, joy becomes accessible again. Quietly, without forcing itself into the room. This part of the journey isn't about a big breakthrough moment. It's about sustainable expansion, about stepping forward without abandoning the calm you worked so hard to build. You're learning that growth doesn't have to be loud to be real. And from this place, what's next doesn't feel intimidating. It feels possible. This is where everything you've been moving through starts to settle into your body, not just your thoughts. It's no longer something you're working on. It becomes the way you stand, the way you speak, the way you pause before reacting. You don't announce the change, but people feel it when they're around you. There's less friction, less noise, more weight to your presence. You're no longer trying to convince life that you're ready. You are ready. And readiness doesn't look like perfection. It looks like steadiness. Like knowing you can handle disappointment without collapsing, and success without losing yourself. That balance took time to build. It took mistakes. It took letting go of fantasies that weren't meant to survive reality. And now that it's here, you're not in a rush to test it. There's a deeper patience in you now. Not the passive kind, but the kind that knows when to move and when to wait without spiraling in either direction. You trust that what's meant to meet you will do so without force. You don't chase confirmation anymore. You let things show themselves. And when they do, you're clear-eyed enough to respond honestly. You may notice that your inner dialogue has softened. It's still direct, still truthful, but not cruel. You don't motivate yourself through pressure anymore. You don't threaten yourself with worst-case scenarios just to keep going. You move because it feels right, not because you're afraid of falling behind. That shift alone is a form of freedom most people never experience. There's also a quiet sense of gratitude threading through this stage. Not the performative kind, the grounded kind. Gratitude for what didn't work out, for what fell apart before it could lock you into the wrong future, for the delays that frustrated you but protected you. You don't romanticize the past, but you understand it now. And understanding brings peace. This part isn't about waiting for something external to arrive. It's about realizing you've already crossed an internal threshold. The version of you that would have mishandled what's coming no longer runs the show. You've grown into someone who can receive without self-sabotage, who can hold stability without getting bored, who can stay open without being naive. You're not chasing signs anymore because you've become one. Your life reflects intention instead of reaction. Your choices come from alignment instead of exhaustion. And even when uncertainty shows up, because it always will, it doesn't knock you off center the way it used to. What comes next doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be honest. Built on what you know now, not what you hoped before. You're walking forward with awareness, not armor. With presence, not pressure. This is the real gift. Not something added to you, but something restored. And it stays with you. Quietly, steadily, long after the moment passes. There's a calm confidence that settles in now, and it's different from anything you've known before. It doesn't push. It doesn't prove. It doesn't need to be seen to be real. It's the kind of confidence that comes from having met yourself honestly, not just your strengths but your limits, and respecting both. You're no longer surprised by your own resilience. You trust it. When something unexpected happens, you don't immediately tense up or assume the worst. You assess. You respond. You move. There's a rhythm to you now that wasn't there before, a steadiness that keeps you from swinging between extremes. Life still happens, but it doesn't throw you around the way it used to. You may notice that your relationships feel different, not colder, just cleaner. There's less guessing, less emotional bargaining, less unspoken resentment. You show up as yourself, without padding, without shrinking, without overextending. And if someone can meet you there, it feels effortless. If they can't, you don't internalize it as failure. You let it be what it is. This stage also brings a sharper sense of self-responsibility, not blame, but ownership. You stop waiting for permission to choose differently. You stop telling yourself you'll act once things settle down. Things rarely settle down. You've learned that. So you move anyway, calmly, intentionally, without needing perfect conditions. There's a quiet strength in the way you protect your energy now. You don't isolate, but you don't overexpose yourself either. You know when to engage and when to step back. You know that not everything deserves a reaction, and not every emotion needs to be explained. That discernment saves you more energy than any productivity system ever could. You might catch moments where you feel fully present, not thinking about what's next, not replaying what's past, just here. Those moments matter. They're signs that you're no longer living entirely in anticipation or recovery mode. You're inhabiting your life as it happens. That's rare, and it's valuable. There's also a sense of grounded optimism emerging. Not blind hope, not denial, just a knowing that whatever unfolds, you'll meet it with clarity instead of panic. You don't need guarantees anymore. You need honesty. And you've learned how to give that to yourself first. This part of the journey doesn't demand anything from you. It simply reflects who you've become. Someone who listens before acting. Someone who moves with intention. Someone who doesn't abandon themselves under pressure. You're not waiting for life to start. It already has. And now, you're actually here for it. There's a moment, and it's quiet, almost easy to miss, where you realize you're no longer preparing for life. You're living it. Not in some dramatic movie scene way, just in the simplest sense. You wake up and you're here. You're in your body, in your choices, in your day. And that alone feels different from how it used to. This is where everything comes together. Not as a conclusion, but as a continuation that finally feels stable. You're not looking over your shoulder anymore, wondering when things will fall apart. You're not scanning the horizon for the next threat or the next miracle. You're grounded where you are, and from that place, the future doesn't feel heavy. It feels open. You understand now that growth wasn't about becoming someone unrecognizable. It was about shedding what was never really you. The fear-based decisions, the constant self-monitoring, the pressure to be understood by everyone. Those layers came off slowly, sometimes painfully, but what's left is solid, real, yours. There's a softness to you now that isn't weakness. It's strength without armor. You don't flinch at emotions anymore, yours or anyone else's. You let them move through without building stories around them. You've learned that feelings don't need to be fixed to be respected. They just need space. And giving yourself that space changed everything. You may notice that when challenges appear, and they still do, you meet them differently. There's less drama inside, less self-blame, less urgency to label the moment as good or bad. You handle what's in front of you, one step at a time, without spiraling into everything it could mean. That presence is power. Quiet power. The kind that doesn't exhaust you. This final stage isn't about arrival. It's about integration. About letting all the lessons you fought for actually serve you. About trusting that you don't need to constantly upgrade yourself to be worthy of peace. You are enough to hold what comes next. Not because you're perfect, but because you're honest with yourself now. There's also a deep sense of relief here. Relief that you don't have to prove how strong you are anymore. You already know. Relief that you don't have to rush healing or success or clarity. You've learned that what's meant for you unfolds when you're steady enough to receive it without losing yourself. You might feel gratitude in unexpected moments. Not loud gratitude, just a quiet appreciation for being here, after everything. For the version of you that didn't give up, even when they were tired, confused, or disillusioned. You honor that version now instead of criticizing them. And that self-respect ripples outward into everything you touch. What comes next will come. Not because you demanded it, not because you waited perfectly, but because you aligned with yourself. And alignment is magnetic in ways effort never was. This is the real ending. Not a stopping point, but a grounded beginning. You're not chasing meaning anymore. You're creating it through how you live, how you choose, how you stay present even when life gets messy. And whatever unfolds from here, you won't meet it as the person you used to be. You'll meet it as you are now. Clear, steady, awake. That's the gift, and it's already yours.